All right, Warrior Next Door listeners, we hope you've enjoyed the John Little series about his experiences in the Italian campaign, something that is not as well known or written about or covered in the annals of World War II. In his final installment, we're going to hear about his homecoming, some of his final or parting thoughts about how the experiences of the war affected him, and also about some of the stuff that he brought back from his time in Italy and in his service. So sit back, listen in, and enjoy this final installment.
I want to go back to near the end of the war. Tell us about Mussolini. Tell us about the hanging of Mussolini and how you came upon that.
Well, what we heard that the Germans were trying to hide Mussolini, trying to get him out of it, and the Italians stopped the truck that he was on. They recognized him. Now, this is what I've heard by his boots that he had on, and they pulled him off. And this boy, this Italian, said that Mussolini asked him not to shoot him in the face, and he didn't. They shot him, and then they brought him down and hung him in Milan. That's where they hung him upside down, although he was already dead. They hung him and 2 women.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was right.
Yeah, one was his mistress, Clara Petacci, I think. I wonder why. I mean, did he think he was going to survive? I mean, why would he say, "Don't shoot me in the face"?
I tell you what happened. The way we understood it, that he loved his daughter so much that they decided that he would have pay him back. He would have his son-in-law killed.
Okay.
Mussolini would. But his daughter talked him out of it or something. But he had him killed anyhow. His daughter, husband. And then, of course, they killed Mussolini and hung him upside down. I think I remember it being 2 women, or 1 or 2 women. I know it was 1.
Mm-hmm.
But it seemed to me like it was about 3 they hung.
So what's interesting, I think back to when Muammar Gaddafi was found as his government collapsed and they were overthrown. I mean, there's some rather disturbing videos on YouTube of Gaddafi being, tortured and killed and stuff, but it's the same sort of thing. They find his convoy, they find him hiding and stuff. They pull him out of the car. They recognize him because of things he was wearing, and then he ends up dying right then and there. The internet says, and we all know the internet's correct on everything, that Mussolini was killed in Guilino, Italy, which is I think John mentioned, Milan, and I think it might be near that area and stuff like that. But it's just north of Milan at the foothills of the Alps.
Yeah, he was with his mistress. He was trying to go into neutral Switzerland. And from what I read and heard, it was his clothes. It was maybe his boots and also the red stripe on his pants. And there were communist sympathizers, that Italian partisans in the north that saw that, and they just went after him. They hung him from an Esso station sign in Milan. And that's still kind of a selfie pic to this day for people that go in there and do things like that. I mean, I hate to say it, but I would go and see that site. And why is it so historic? Fascism, many historians believe that fascism was created by Benito Mussolini in Italy, and that people like the Japanese and the Germans emulated that style of government, that style of control over their people that led to World War II. So he was the OG. He was the OG fascist. And he had been rescued on at least one occasion, maybe twice, by the Germans. And so he was kind of a Rasputin, where he was just this slippery dude that no one could seem to find. He always found a way to get out of that. And they made sure that it didn't happen this time.
One of the things that's so interesting to me is that much of what Hitler crafted as his persona was from watching Mussolini speeches.
Absolutely.
In the 30s, and and actually Hitler was a bit of an admirer of Mussolini and the way he conducted himself and his stage presence and all that stuff. And
he was a confidant. If people remember early in before the war started, when Hitler met with Neville Chamberlain to sign the Peace in Our Time agreement, Mussolini was there advising Adolf Hitler. So this guy was seen as a model, as an OG for how do you take a poor country gutted by war, get it back economically strong, take control over all the things in a way that the people seem to support and are okay with. How do you do that? And he showed the world in the late 20s, early 30s that models. And you're right, Germany emulated it, Japan emulated it. Mm-hmm. So he had to be captured. I read somewhere that he wasn't just hung, that he was mutilated, that they actually like stripped like the skin off him and stuff, and that there were a couple of other people that were hung. It wasn't just his mistress and him.
There's a famous photo that's easy to find on the internet that it shows them hanging upside down like chunks of meat from in a meat locker, but they're still clothed. Looks like from Mussolini, you can tell that he had been beaten quite a bit. He had
been, yep.
And I think that their bodies were actually later taken down and just in a pile right there and stuff. And there was a veteran that I tried to interview back near my hometown who was a tank guy, and he rolled up through there and he came upon the very same site. Yeah. He saw the Mussolini hanging there and stuff, and could never get the chance to interview him. He just wasn't interested. But anyway, it's amazing the history that a lot of these guys rolled past. I mean, everywhere over there, and those guys, they talk about the history that they're like, John was talking about history. History was everywhere.
Yes.
One of the things when I was doing some research for this, there's the Appian Way. The Appian Way is an ancient highway, Roman highway, dates back to before the time of Christ. I mean, it's in the 300 BC. And it was a military road to actually allow the movement of troops throughout Italy, in an easy way and in a direct way, kind of like the first interstate.
Okay? Yeah, or an autobahn.
Or an autobahn and stuff. Well, along that Appian Way, there was at one point a big slave revolt. Okay. And this leader of this slave revolt, they rose up and they were like, the heck with you Romans, we're not doing this anymore. And there was a big battle that happened. Of course, the slave revolt was crushed and all these guys were captured, and the Romans ended up crucifying 6,000 of these guys along the Appian Way.
Yeah.
Over 120 miles. Okay. So you just do the math.
Yeah.
6,000 crucifixions over 120 miles. That comes out to one crucifixion every 105 feet. So you would be walking along that highway, and every 100 feet, you see a guy dead or dying on a cross for 120 miles. I mean, I just can't imagine the barbarism back then. It was just another level of, anyway, that's a story I heard when I was in Italy, and I read it, came across it again while I was doing research. I'm like, oh my gosh, there is history everywhere.
There is.
That's a cradle of history in my mind. There's so much that went on over there.
I'll never forget that it was literally the last thing. We had a tour guide of the Colosseum. It was the last thing she said before we departed and gave her a tip. After showing us all this remarkable stuff that they built there, she said the Romans were bloodthirsty, barbaric, and cruel, but they were amazing engineers.
It's true. It's so true.
And that was the last thing she said to us in English. And
Yeah.
I'll never forgot that because
My gosh.
what she was trying to convey, I think, was look, it's amazing that we can celebrate all this Romanness. And so much of what we have today is based on that time and that culture and what they did. But don't forget the other side of it. This was not a group of friendly people. This is not who we want the world to be.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I got another little thing to
Oh,
add.
go ahead.
So we're on that same trip we were on, we went to visit the Pont du Gard. Actually, this was an earlier trip. This was in France, down around Avignon and everything. The Pont du Gard is a Roman aqueduct that crosses a valley. Okay. It was built in the time of Jesus, right around the year 0 was when this, and I'm not kidding, that's when this aqueduct was built. And you go there today and you can climb up and you can stand in the canal of the aqueduct and look down the aqueduct across to the other side of the valley. And 2,000 years later, it is still perfect.
Yeah.
The canal doesn't, you'd think after all this time, there would have been some earth movements, things would have happened, but no, it is still absolutely perfect down through there. And it looks like, I mean, you can still see where the water line was from the years that it flowed, and it didn't flow. I actually don't know how long that flowed water, but it was brought down from the hills and was being brought to the nearest cities and stuff so they could have running water. I mean, it was amazing.
Yeah. No,
engineers, great engineers.
That is absolutely amazing. And John mentioned several times during the interview about fighting a war in history. In fact, we got one more of that coming up where he reinforces that. So
yes,
on the next clip, he's going to talk about going home, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about history. Do you remember the name of the ship that you took on the way home?
Yes, the name of it was USS Randolph. It was an aircraft carrier.
Oh, okay.
They were served in the Pacific. And what they did, they sent those aircraft carriers home because they had more room on them and they had more places for people to sleep. Because that was the first time that they had black and whites mixed up together was on that ship.
Yeah, the service was not. Oh, go ahead.
Huh?
Yeah, the service was not integrated then.
No. And because I was so seasick, you got seasick. I don't care, even some of the sailors got seasick. I know I did. And this black guy, he said, I've heard, come over there where I was sitting. He said, I've heard if you eat salty peanuts, that'll help that. And he gave me a pack of salted peanuts, and it did help.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Well, that was a USS Randolph, because the reason I remember it was the first ship that picked up astronauts.
Mm.
You know, remember when they recovered them in the water back then?
Yep.
I don't know how they do it now, but USS Randolph was the first ship to recover people that was dropped into the sea.
And the Randolph is named after. There's no way I was ever taught this ever. It was named after the founding father, Peyton Randolph. He was the president of the First Continental Congress. So before we had the president and before it was even thought of, when we still had the Articles of Confederation and we were still trying to figure out what to do after we became independent, he was a founding father of sorts that probably no one ever heard of.
No,
And
I had never heard of him.
I've never heard of that dude. And on top of that, those missions he's talked about, those were the Mercury missions, when they would splash down the ocean, they go pick them up. So it was an Essex. The Randolph was an Essex class carrier. It was a modern 22,000 ton beautiful carrier that did a bunch of stuff in the Pacific. But it's what he's talking about here is Operation Magic Carpet, which we've talked about in a previous episode, where we brought home millions of men in 1 year, and brought back POWs and repatriated people while we were doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's talk about his homecoming. Next clip, please.
Well, I remember that what the day we got her discharge, I had my sister lived in Birmingham. She had a phone. We didn't have phones down where we lived. And I had my sister's number. So I went over to her house. And we had a taxi. See, I got $300 now, you got to remember, from the government when they discharged me. $300, 3 years of combat. That was pretty good, $100 a year. And we gave him $5 this taxi from Birmingham to carry us to Manila, which was about 25 miles.
Yeah.
So that's how I got home.
Do you remember how your parents or siblings reacted when they first saw you?
Yeah, all of my girlfriends, they all lined up.
Tell them the story of you and mother.
Yeah, tell them about the letter writing.
Oh, this is good.
Oh, you tell them, bitch.
Oh,
You tell.
grandmother was a school teacher, and she instructed her class, please write to these soldiers. And she told my mother, you need to write to Sonny Little, John Little. She said, no, I have no intentions of doing that. So my grandmother wrote to my daddy while he was in the service, thinking daddy thought the whole time it was mother. So mother received a letter once and looked at it, and it said, I love you more each letter I received. So mother said, I think I should be reading the letter.
So let me so first off, the fact that you can hear the woman speaking is Pixie, that's his daughter. The fact that you can hear it all is a plug to Filmora, because in the regular audio, this Ferretti audio, you can't hear her. She's like, rah, 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 rah. So heck yeah to AI audio editing. Her mom was saying, you ought to write to John. Come on, man. He doesn't have a girlfriend. He's just this young dude. He's over there fighting in Italy. You should do something. She's, I'm not going to do that. I'm too young for that crap. So her mom writes letters pretending to be her daughter until it starts getting kind of, like John starts really spilling his guts out. And that's when her mom's like, hey, I need to let you know I've been doing this. Here it is. And then she picked up the pen and started to engage with him. I don't think I've ever heard that before.
Wow.
You got to think that, mom saw something in John Little, because, in the next clip that we're going to hear, they would end up getting married and live happily ever after. But it took a bit of intervention for it to happen.
I remember we went across this little airport one day, and we couldn't get across it. But during the night, we did. And I remember the next morning, I said, that can't be. And somebody come, the runner, that was the communication back then, came down and said, the captain said not fire one shot in that leaning tower piece. I said, that can't be the leaning tower piece. But it was.
Oh my goodness.
I said, I'm seeing the leaning tower piece. And it was. It was as plain as day. They let you walk out there where you could see it real well. But back in 1984, when we got to go back, I walked down there to exactly where it was.
Yeah. Oh.
Where I was at when I looked up and saw the Pisa during the war.
That must have been incredible.
It was fun.
Did you have a chance to go to any of the places that the division went? Like, did you go to Bologna? Did you go to some of those old places that you remember?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Went to Bologna.
But what was it like to go there in '84? About 40 years after the war, What was it like for you to go back and see some of those places that you saw as a young man during a war?
Well, they had really done well as a country, you know. When we went in there, they had absolutely nothing to eat. The Germans would took everything they had, and we would go down to the kitchen area, and we would talk to sergeant and giving us flour and what would it take to make spaghetti, and we'd find somebody that, and it wasn't hard to find. They'd be wanting to do it. They'd make spaghetti, and he'd give us a can of crushed tomatoes, which they had plenty of. They would fix us food, you know. And then you go back, and they've done well, like I say, accumulating stuff.
Yeah. Oh, they sure have. You go there now, thanks to the Marshall Plan and free market economy and all these tourists that go check this stuff out. I mean, yeah, Italy's not that poor country that he saw when they were working their way up the boot. They're doing quite well, and that's great. Yeah. So, um, Ryan, I want to play clip 26 next and then 25 last.
All right, sounds good.
All right, let's do it. There is one other thing, though. You have that that war room. We're going to get that picture and put it behind this. What sort of things are there? I thought I saw, like, for example, what rank were you when you left the military?
I was a T5.
C5. So you're a what, sergeant of something, one type of sergeant.
I was a corporal, technical corporal.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
I thought
corporal, okay.
C5 was sergeant. Okay. So you were a squad leader then. And I also noticed you had a picture of like a German gun, a P-38. What's the story behind that?
I got that from a German off the belts with it too.
Oh,
He was allowed to cut the belt and put it together, you know. I don't know what that word is, Dale. A belt, how he split it 3 places and lapped them over. I don't know what that word is. You?
We never had any leather belt.
Yeah.
All I was.
So was that in Bologna?
Got the buckle on it too, see.
Was that in Bologna?
It's the pistol, the scabbard, the belt.
And the little tool that takes it apart.
okay.
All right. What else is in the war room photo? I saw a photo of you in the lower left. I saw
Then I
above
got
that.
the foxhole.
Oh,
I was on guard. The road split. One went one way and one other, and they dropped you off at those places. And I was in that foxhole. In this foxhole picture, my little Bible, and then my picture's under it. That is what they call a combat Bible.
Okay.
Because it's got on the front of it, it's got a piece of metal. And you're supposed to wear that in your coat pocket.
Have you ever shot that P-38?
No, never have.
Never shot it, really.
Oh, but I got the official papers from a general authorizing me to have it.
well, you're lucky.
Bring something like that home. You just couldn't hide it.
Good.
You had to, because if they'd have found it in my pack, they would have taken it away. But I had permission from a general to have it. So I got those papers at home too.
Yeah. So what we're referring to is when we first got online, there was a photo backdrop of displays from things he brought back from the war that included a P-38 and a variety of photos. He wanted to keep it as a backdrop, but it made the video look kind of wonky. I just got a bunch of pictures from him last week, and when we do the edits and put this on our website, we'll put it on our website so people can check it out. There's all kinds of photos of him in uniform, of him at the front lines, of all the stuff that he brought back, including a P-38 with what he's referring to is often called bring back papers, which means you could legally do it. Most of the GIs, when they brought stuff back from the war, they didn't do that. They just put it in a duffel bag and just brought it home.
That's what Bill did.
That's right. That's what most of them did. But having those bring back papers actually adds significant historicity and value to those things. And Ryan and I really like seeing these things when these guys have them. We have one more clip. He's going to talk about his wife, and he's going to talk about what about the war kind of he wanted to share with future generations.
My family's always been not selfish. And my two girls are not selfish. But I'm lucky enough to still be got my right mind. I say I do. And I'm over 100 years old. Very few people can say that.
That's true.
And of course, like I said, we go to the cemetery where my wife's buried every day except Sunday. And a lot of times we don't go on Saturday. Put flowers on her grave. Make sure she's got, because there's a big tulip farm on the way down there. And we stop and get tulips for her. And we try to do what she would want us to do and live peacefully among ourselves.
So
that's great.
He's so devoted to her. Earlier in the interview, there's also a clip where he talks about the cemetery he wants to be buried in and how she can be buried in that American cemetery as well because she's the wife of a veteran. But he mentioned earlier about, for future generations, to not be selfish. That's something that he really learned. And just in reading Donald Miller's book about the war in Italy, it's called Up the Boot, this amazing quote popped out, which I think is a good fit for this. It reads, "Before he went into combat, Geddes wrote his parents trying to explain why he and his fellow GIs found it so difficult to tell people back home what they were experiencing. It's hard for men who live only because they cooperate to explain things to people who live only as semi-isolated individuals. A frontline soldier will almost always give you half of his last dollar or one of his last 2 cigarettes. An American civilian finds it hard to lend you half of his surplus." It speaks to that unselfishness, that camaraderie, that closeness that these men feel. And I think maybe that's what he was trying to convey when we asked him, what would you want to share with future generations about this?
Sounds like it to me. I mean, that fits perfect with what he just told us.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to end it there. We want to thank, again, Dale Baker. We want to thank Pixie, his daughter. We want to thank John Little for taking the time to meet with us. We hope our audience really enjoys being able to hear firsthand from someone who was there about a battle that is not necessarily forgotten, but just not as talked about. I hope that we can bring a little more life, color, texture to what these men had to do and suffer in a front that was really more of a holding action, a successful holding action. Let's not diminish what they did. They did work their way up the boot. They did make it to Italy. They did break the Gustav Line, Rome, the Gothic Line, but at great cost with a lot of questionable leadership. But it did pin down a significant portion of the German army, which allowed operations like Anvil and operations like, with D-Day, Overlord, all that to happen. So
imagine, just real quick, if there wasn't the pressure from the Allies coming up from the south across the Mediterranean, would the Italians have pulled out of the war at that point? It could have been a lot worse if we had to come up through Italy.
Yeah.
Perhaps if the Italian army had stayed allied with the Germans and kept participating, that could have prolonged the war even more.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
There was a historian, I wish I could remember his name, I give him credit for it, who said, what if Italy was properly resourced? And what if we were able to land where we should have, potentially more in northern Italy, and then work our way into the Balkans, which Germany was scared to death of us going into the Balkans. There were a number of divisions that Germany kept in places like Yugoslavia and Hungary and whatnot that were there to keep the partisan fighting under control, and also to maintain control of the rear areas as they were still fighting the Russians. What would it have looked like? What would Eastern Europe have looked like if we were able to go up to the north, into the east, into the Balkans, and occupy those and liberate those in a way that before the Soviets did? Would we have had an Eastern Europe with an Iron Curtain? Or would that have been avoided because we were there and not them? Remember, we met them at the Elbe River in Western Germany. And everything to the east was their playground. They liberated it. They could do what they want. What if we worked our way up underneath to the east and linked up with the Russians in Poland and defeated Germany that way? So anyway, all the what ifs, what ifs of history. When I heard that guy say that, I was like, wow, holy crap, I hadn't thought about
there's a lot of ways you can war game this. And I wonder how much our government has done that over time, looking at the strategy behind the decisions they made and how they might have changed the outcome in a lot of ways geopolitically by adjusting their decisions and stuff. And whether you can even know that, it's one thing to be able to look back on it and be an armchair quarterback now. How do you recognize it coming as history comes towards you?
Totally.
That's what's tough.
So for our audience, just a few things. Thing number one, please comment on these videos. We have a Facebook page on the warriornextdoor.com. We have a website, warriornextdoor.com, where you can leave comments on the bottom of any of the pages. Each person that we feature on our podcast has its own webpage. Sometime I'm a interview or two behind, right? Because this isn't our only job, but I'll try to get the website caught up for this one where you can see pictures, leave comments. And also what's really important is if you like what we're doing, and we're just two dudes doing this. We're not special forces heroes that are bringing all of our friends to the table to do this. We're just two dudes who have a passion for this, who think that this is the citizen historian is what really drives the preservation of history, not the Ciceros, not the Ambroses. They pull from us. If you like what we're doing, if you listen to a podcast, go to the bottom and subscribe to our podcast. Like us. Hit the little 5 heart
follow
thing,
us.
The 5 stars, follow us. Those things allow us to have access to potential ways to help support the show that we don't have right now. So if you don't like our show, then for the love of God, don't ding us and say you hate us. Just ignore everything and leave and go find someplace else to go play. But if you do like us, please subscribe, and give us the 5-star rating.
And one last thing I'll say, one of the things that people have commented and said that they don't like is that we maybe talk too much about things. Well, there's a remedy for that. And that is watch the uncut video, which Tony puts out on our YouTube channel, puts on our website. You can watch the veteran without us jumping in and adding our 2 cents on stuff for context. So you've got all options there. Tony, great interview, great landing this interview. That was a fantastic story, and I have learned a ton about that whole side of the war. So I guess we'll sign off here. My name is Ryan Fairfield.
And I'm Tony Lupo.
And we will catch you next time.
Okay, Ryan, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording then.